Hello everybody, Blue Dooley, and in this video we're going to start rebuilding the CXT. It has been quite some time since the truck has been on the channel, actually probably a couple of years I think. The last time I took it out on the trail was with the trailer and James, and that's probably been 2, maybe 3 years ago. I don't actually remember the last time this thing was on the channel, except for a brief mention, and maybe photos of it next to the 53 hauler. So, got my Red Cat hat on, because the CXT is getting some Red Cat parts, along with parts from a Tamiya. It'll still keep some of the HPI parts. It's gonna be kind of a Frankenstein worth of parts. So in this video, we're going to go over the parts. We'll take the cab and bed off the chassis, kind of gloss over the original build. There is a full playlist on this truck. And then we'll get started on the new chassis and kind of go over what direction this is going. And if it works, it's going to be killer. If it doesn't work, I'm probably going to chew up a lot of gears or break drive shafts. Who knows? That's half the fun of the hobby. It sort of does what I originally built it to do, which is pull a trailer. But it's geared so low, it just barely outpaces my slow walk. And I'd like it to have a little more top end. I also want it to have a lot more pulling power. So the truck is a New Bright International CXT. This is the big one, which they called 6th scale, but it's actually closer to 10th than the one they listed as 10th scale. These are 6-inch tall J-Concepts tires. These are the Scorpos, and they perform. I love the way they perform on the truck. So those are glued to those rims, and I really don't want to mess with trying to unglue them. So I'm going to have to order a new set of tires. These rims aren't going to be used again. These are RPM 3.2 wheels, 17 millimeter hexes. But the tread pattern on these Scorpios, I really like them for this kind of big medium duty truck. So like I said, I'm happy sort of with the way the build came out, but some of the parts I'm not really happy with. The suspension on this thing's terrible. It just wobbles way too much. It is leaf spring in the front. We'll get into it there in a little bit. But it is dual brushed motored. So we're going brushless. I'm going to make a new bumper for it. And like I said, new chassis. So let's go over the Red Cat parts of the build. So these are the Marksman axles off the Red Cat Marksman, which is the bigger crawler they have. And these axles from hex to hex are just a hair wider than the Wheelie King axles this truck has. So I will have to, well actually, the wheels actually tuck inside the fender, so these might actually make them flush with the fender depending on the off spacing of the wheels. We're going to run the shock absorbers and springs off of the 53 COE from Red Cat. So there's part number for that. I don't have the bag these came in, so I don't have the part number for that. And then we also have the aluminum transfer case housing for the Marksman. I left them in the bed. But we also have the Marksman's transfer cased shafts and the transfer case gear set. Actually, I think that's the main gear and the transfer case. Yeah, steel gear set for the Gen 8 transmission and transfer case. I think these also fit the Marksman. Anyways, those are all the Red Cat parts we're going to run. We might add some more parts later. I also picked up a whole bunch of just generic 4mm aluminum rod ends. I have a bunch of stainless steel 5mm rod. Those are Amazon specials. And then I got these great big rod ends because I wanted to do a radius arm on the front end. So it'll just have one big heim joint, and then the other end will be solidly bolted to the axle. I'm not sure if I'm going to use these or not. They might be way too big. So that's kind of drive Red Cat parts, miscellaneous Amazon parts. The other non-Amazon or Red Cat part is this is a 3-speed transmission for all the semi-trucks that Tamiya makes. The Grand Hauler, the King Hauler, the Globeliner, the Freightliners, the Scanias, the Mans, the Volvos, all of them have the same transmission. And all of them come with plastic gears, which I didn't use. So the brass gears are helical cut. They are from Extra Speed. And these aluminum dogs, shift dogs, are also Extra Speed. So the housing is Tamiya, and then the two shafts are actually Tamiya upgraded their hardened shafts for these transmissions. So how well these gears and everything are going to hold up to the power we're going to put in it, I don't know. This plate I designed up in CAD, and I just got them from Send Cut Send. There's this plate that bolts to the transmission. And then this is the motor plate. So what we're going to do is we're going to cram two Hobbywing 3665 G3 2400 kV censored motors. These have a 5mm input motor shaft, and we're going to be running two of those and two Max 10 G2 brushless speed controllers. So two of those, two motors, 3-speed transmission. You can kind of see where we're going with this. So I got these plates, like I said, from Send Cut Send. I need to make the center section that goes between them, which is actually going to hold the bearings for the center shaft. There'll be a bearing flush up here, and then there will be a matching one flush there. All three of these gears are going to be the same size. These are 32 tooth, I think. 35 tooth. Excuse me. 35 tooth Mod 1 pinion gears for a 5mm motor shaft. So 3 of those across. I did try to give myself enough wiggle room so I can change these if I need to gear down and add more reduction if the top speed's too fast. I can put smaller pinions on here, really give it more reduction besides the first gear in the Tamiya unit, which I'll have to put in the screen at the bottom because I don't know it off the top of my head. But it'll be a 3D printed part sandwiched between these two 3mm plates. This plate is also how this transmission is going to mount to the frame. So this bolt will be long enough, it'll bolt to a bracket on the frame, and then I'll probably put something here on the back to support the back end of the transmission. So yeah, dual motor, 3-speed, transfer case to the axles. Hopefully, and these will run I forget how many cells these will run. I think these will run 4S. Doesn't actually say. I don't actually have any 3S or 4S, so both of these motors will probably run off of 2-cell LiPos. Depending on how all of these parts handle dual brushless, I might get a pair of 3-cell for the truck, just so I can have just stupid amounts of power. The servos I still need to order. Currently it's using a brushless Savox for steering, and I just can't stand the Savox servos anymore. Even sitting flat on the bench, it'd be buzzing and making noise. So steering will be a Reefs servo. I haven't decided on what size yet. And then the transmission shifting will be a Reefs micro servo, probably micro 55, which will be way overkill for shifting, but I really liked those Reefs servos after I got one. So I need to get another motor and ESC in. Gotta wait for payday, because I had to change the alternator in the Jeep, which ate up pretty much all of the fund money we had left over. $255 for an alternator, and that was for me to change it. So let me get the cab off, and then we'll go over this chassis a little more. Got the cab and the bed off. So the truck is made out of 3/4 inch aluminum channel. It's actually like kind of a decorative trim. It's actually supposed to go over the end of a piece of plywood or something. And it is fastened together with nothing but stainless steel screws, and nuts. The entire chassis is bolted together. So you don't need a welder to build custom chassis. In fact, all I had was the drill press and a hacksaw. I pretty much cut everything with a hacksaw. The only steel is the 4-link mount here on the rear, but the rest of it is aluminum angle, aluminum channel, and then I got some real thick aluminum flat stock up here in the front for the bumper. The servo mount, also aluminum. And then I put a single screw through the front of the frame here. So the body has a little matching tab that just sits down there, pulls back, and then uses the mounts on the back of the cab to bolt to this piece of aluminum angle. The steps and the air tanks on the other side are from the truck. This fuel cell I printed. And then this is just a cutting board. So for running gear, what this truck is actually running is a Spectrum 4-channel receiver, and then 2 1080 quick run brushed motors, or brushed ESCs, and then 2 Tekin 45 turn heavy duty motors. This is a dual motor transmission for a Traxxas E-Revo or E-Max, I forget. I think it could also be 2-speed, but this one was only single speed. So both motors go into the Traxxas transmission. Drive shaft actually runs to a HPI Wheelie King transmission, which I used as a drop box. So I actually cut the input shaft down, modified a pin to go through that shaft, and that's how I split the power to front and rear. These are HPI Wheelie King axles, and this one is actually running the Crawler King links. I think these are Traxxas shocks off of whatever. RC 4-wheel drive straight axle conversion. They don't make these anymore, and I forget who makes these 17mm hex adapters. So the bare spot here is because the bed actually needed to have its own frame to space it up properly so the bottom of the bed lined up with the bottom of the cab. And then that also allowed me to put a ball for like the gas struts on like hatchbacks, or the glass on the back of an SUV, those little gas struts that hold things up. Yeah, that makes a pretty good scale gooseneck ball. So that bolts to a big thick chunk of aluminum that's bolted to that channel. And then actually that's kind of how they mount things to real medium duty and heavy duty truck tabs, is they just bolt them down. Traxxas trans, HPI trans, carrier bearing to go out to the back, and then just a long drive shaft up here to the front. Leaf springs, they do okay, but they're just too weak for the weight. And then, as I mentioned, a Savox brushless servo. I don't remember the specs off the top of my head. So this, like I said, this is the only steel. Bent in a vise, cut out with tin snips or an angle grinder, and then drilled on the drill press. Nice thing about medium duty trucks is the chassis are straight. So you don't have to worry about the chassis dipping to clear an axle or any of that crap. Straight chassis. Which is what we're going to build out of steel. Actually, I have some steel tubing, but I'm going to cut that tubing in half, and those will be my channel. It's for the frame. And then the other thing I'm going to do is all the cross members in this are bolted together. That's actually probably impossible to see, but there's a center cross member, this cross member, and then the one at the front. So I'm basically going to chop my tubing up to be the same exact length as this tubing or channel. And then we'll base the width off of the new axles, because the shocks actually mount considerably wider. Guess I could hold you level. So the rear will be 4-link, and then the front will be radius arm. And then I have the on-off switches for the things underneath the cab, so I can just reach them real easy. Both wires come up here, and the battery is actually Velcro under between the bottom of the cab and the air tank and the fuel tank. So the bandsaw would have taken me 6 years. It just doesn't cut very fast, so I broke out the angle grinder, sliced it that way. They did not come out perfectly straight, but by the time I weld cross members in and bolt stuff to it, paint it black, the only way you're going to know that it's not perfectly straight is if you watch this video. So I'm going to deburr those and just throw a flat wheel on the grinder and just kind of buzz them smooth. And then we need to figure out how far apart they need to be, because the axle spring mounts are different. So the chassis can be a little wider. So I put the shocks on that rear axle, and we'll kind of base our frame spacing off of where the shocks are. So let me clean those up and we'll get back. So this is where a fixture table really shines, is keeping things square. And I didn't mention it in the other video, but you need a 5/16 Allen to tighten the bolts down for the hold down. So I'm using the pucks and the aluminum brackets, the steel brackets, and a piece of the tubing to keep the front of the frame even. And then I just have some magnets holding the frame rails up. I just set them there. I haven't done any measuring yet or not, but this will allow me to clamp stuff down and kind of figure out the width. So I can make the chassis quite a bit wider. I think I'm going to make the chassis come right out to the lower link mounts. And even with the chassis that wide, I mounted up one of the bigger tires. So if I bring the chassis rails out to here, they're not going to rub. And they're also not going to rub the radius arms. That'll let me have that frame really wide. The tires will clear the shocks real easily. And I think that'll make the truck a lot more side-to-side stable, just widening it. So the current frame is 3 1/8. And right now we just kind of plop this out at 4 1/8 somehow. So I need to measure those shocks. I think we'll kind of eyeball it together here. They're right at about 5 1/2. So the frame, so if I go 5 inches, that frame will be 2 inches wider than the original frame, and I will still have plenty of tire clearance to have full lock-to-lock steering. Again, these shocks don't have a ton of travel, so I mean, it's not like the tires are going to flex up. They might rub the body a little bit, but that'll leave me plenty of room for the transmission too. So let's grab this transmission here. So actually, if I go 5 inches, that'll be too wide for the transmission. So I think maybe we'll measure that, and we will make the frame rails as wide as this bracket is. And then these bolt holes will be about center. I'm still going to weld tabs to the chassis rails to mount it to. And then that should give, well, the transmissions and stuff will, transmission and transfer case will place after we get wheelbase situated. And I don't know if I'm going to get links made today or not, but I'd like to, at the end of the video, at least have the chassis squared, the front and the rear welded up. I don't know if we'll get the center cross member, English is hard, welded in, because that center cross member kind of is going to depend on where this has to go. Will determine where that center cross member goes. Boy, being able to clamp stuff and keeping it square sure does make this a lot easier. Now all I need to do is be a better welder. I've never claimed to be a great welder, but I forgot and left the garage door open and the fan running, and it blew all my shielding gas away. So after grinding the first welds down, they didn't look too good. And then I remembered, hey, your shielding gas is getting blown away. So I closed the door, The rear cross member turned out a lot better. I am happy with that. And then I measured the center cross member on the other truck and just put this one right dead center in the same spot. I just notched the tube on each end, and before I welded the rear one in, I got that one in, welded it up, welded that one in. So the transfer case for the Marksman is actually a lot more lower profile, no matter which way you mount it, than the HPI Wheelie King transmission. I mean, that thing goes all the way down and sticks up above the frame rails. So this transfer case is going to have plenty of room for it, no matter where I want to put it. In fact, actually, it would almost bolt right in that chassis. But the new chassis is, of course, quite a bit wider. So it's all right. Gives me plenty of options for mounting stuff in. So I need to re-weld up that front bracket, grind it smooth. Somebody stuck in my pocket. I've pretty much stripped the old chassis as much as I'm going to strip it. The bumper I'm not going to reuse. The chassis, nothing on the chassis I'm going to reuse. I'm going to remake these mud guards, the leaf spring mounts, cross members, all that stuff, the carrier bearing. They're just not needed for the direction I'm going now. So from end to end, they are identical. And that'll show you how much wider the new chassis is. And I'm actually really surprised how much more rigid this is than the other one. But we're going to call it for today. I need to go get a couple other things done. But I'll show you what I mean by rigid here. Let's aim me up so you can see me. I switched hats because I don't want to weld in a good hat. This is my welding hat. I do stuff in the garage hat. So here is the original aluminum chassis, and I can twist the heck out of it. Now, this is actually a pretty substantial channel, and there's nothing wrong with chassis flex. I know some other RC YouTubers really fixate on a rigid chassis. Here's the thing, a real vehicle doesn't have that rigid of a chassis. A medium duty truck will, and even my Mac, I can twist the frame quite a bit on that real truck. So now race cars and stuff, tube chassis, those will be more rigid than a ladder style chassis like this, or mail or scale chassis like most crawlers have. Those, some flex isn't that bad. Real vehicles do that. But this chassis, despite being wider, I mean, I can get a little twist out of it, but not much, which is kind of what I want. And this thing's actually going to get quite a bit more rigid as I bolt more stuff to it, because I want this truck to be a pulling truck, not for competition pulling, for I set my fat ass on the trailer, tow myself around, or if the gears will take it, I'm really kind of hoping it'll pull a lot more than me. So a more rigid chassis is absolutely okay in this particular application. Plus that body is old, and that plastic's pretty brittle, so the less the chassis flexes underneath that cab, the less likely that cab is to break. So the other thing this chassis is going to need, this is the top, the bottom's just the angle, is I'm going to run some angle iron along the bottom here between both, I don't know if I'll go full shock mount to shock mount, but kind of in between the axles. That'll add more rigidity to it, plus it'll give me enough meat to build the lower cage structure for the rear link mounts, the front link mounts, the transfer case, stuff like that. But that is going to do it for this video. You've seen my Red Cat hat. If you order enough stuff from Red Cat, you get enough points, you get a free hat. I have an affiliate link for Red Cat down in the description. If you want to use it, cool. If you don't want to use it, cool. All the support I need is click the like button wherever it is, subscribe, leave me a comment. That's all I need. We'll catch you in the next video. Hope everyone had a good weekend.